In 1932, Charlie Pollard was a 26-year-old farmer living in Macon County, Alabama, where 82% of the population at the time was African American, and they were all forced to live under the rules of a strictly segregated society. At the time, the United States was just beginning to crawl out of the Great Depression that had started 3 years earlier, but you wouldn't know it riding through Charlie's town. Like Charlie, many of the other residents in Macon County were completely dirt poor, and they lived in these wooden shacks with no screens on their windows. There was no furniture inside, and they would just throw some dirty rags on the ground to sleep on. On average, the men in the town that were lucky enough to have a job made less than $1 per day. So when Charlie heard a rumor that the government was going to be coming to town and giving free medical exams to all the African American men, Charlie was thrilled. He had never been to a doctor before, and he certainly wasn't going to turn down a free visit to one. And so a couple of days later, the rumor turned out to be true when a government health service worker showed up in their town and set up shop in their one-room schoolhouse. Charlie got in line with the hundreds of other men from Macon County, and then by mid-morning it was his turn, and the health service worker told him that today they were just going to be doing a blood test. And so Charlie eagerly rolled up his sleeve and stuck his arm out. A couple of days later, the results from the blood test had come in, and Charlie was informed that he had bad blood. Bad blood was a commonly used term in that area at the time to describe a wide array of ailments. The worker didn't get into specifics about what Charlie's diagnosis meant. They just told him that in virtue of his diagnosis of bad blood, he was now eligible to join a government-sponsored medical treatment program. If he agreed to be a part of it, he would not only receive medical care for his bad blood, he would also receive free rides to and from the health clinic, he would get a free hot meal on examination days, and in the event he died during the program, his family would be given $50 if they allowed the doctors to perform a thorough autopsy on his body before they buried him. Despite not really understanding what it meant to have bad blood, Charlie decided to join the program, mostly because of those free meals and because he had a deep trust and respect of the government. And Charlie wasn't alone. About 400 other African American men from Macon County agreed to be a part of the program as well. At first, the program was everything they promised it would be. It was just a couple of low-key medical examinations with a nice hot meal, and then occasionally they would take some pills and have another blood draw. But eventually they started being given regular, excruciatingly painful spinal taps that would leave them bedridden for weeks afterwards. But despite this painful and surprising turn of events that none of the men saw coming, they were not aware they would be getting spinal taps as part of this program. Charlie and the other men were convinced this program was still in their best interest and that they could trust the government to eventually cure them of their bad blood. And so Charlie and the other men didn't resist the spinal taps or other follow-on painful and bizarre medical procedures that they were being told was good for them and would help them get rid of this bad blood. Less than a year later, men in this program began getting sick. They started developing rashes and sores all over their body. Their bones and joints would ache. They began losing hair. They had indigestion. They had headaches. They had constant fevers. And for some of the men, these symptoms would eventually subside. But for others, they got dramatically worse. For those men, they would develop tumors and their bones would start to disintegrate. They would go blind or deaf or become paralyzed, or they would simply die. But despite the obvious ineffectiveness of this treatment program, it persisted. When America entered World War II in 1941, Charlie and many of the other men in this program wanted to enlist in the military and go join the fight. But when they went to enlist, they were told that as members of this special medical program, they could only receive treatment from the doctors in that program. And so they could not receive treatment from military doctors and therefore were disqualified from military service. While frustrated by this rule, Charlie and many of the other men still considered themselves to be very fortunate to be allowed to be a part of this program that was curing them of their bad blood. And Charlie specifically felt like he was one of the luckiest men inside of this program because his bad blood had not led to these terrible symptoms that his friends were experiencing. And so over the years, in between his medical appointments, Charlie got married, he had a child, he even managed to buy a little plot of land that he farmed on nearly year-round. Then, in 1973, so over 40 years after they began this medical program, Charlie and the other survivors of this program had their lives completely turned upside down. That year, a very junior assistant within the public health service secretly mailed off all of the records of this Macon County medical program to the Associated Press. And then a couple of days later, the Washington Star newspaper ran this huge story on their front page that said syphilis victims in United States study went untreated for 40 years.